Okay, hello, my name's Laurian, and in a previous life I was the Research Data Management Service Developer at the University of Nottingham. So myself and my colleague Dr. Tom Parsons were working on one of the 17 big institutional RDM projects that was looking at pretty much everything involved in RDM, from the technical infrastructure to the human infrastructure, the socio-technical. I was very pleased when Steve and Sarah asked me to present today, because we weren't part of the RDM training strand, but what we soon realised in this project that as soon as you start thinking about the human infrastructure, you need to start thinking about what skills there are within your institution. So as much as this is about training today, my presentation is actually more about how we manage to engage IT staff, which at that point we didn't think was highly unusual until it was mentioned by Sarah and Joy at our DCC engagement. We found it quite easy to engage IT staff. But it's more about building a bit of capacity and capability. On the maturity scale for RDM, Nottingham was definitely very immature in the services that they were providing for RDM, and actually even within the RDM landscape. Okay, so as I said, it was one of these big 17 institutional RDM projects. But what it did mean was we did have to look at the whole picture with RDM. It was funded by just for 18 months, but Tom and I had only been in post for 12 months, and the project is now closed. For the 6 months prior to our appointment, there was a lot of work about around the technical infrastructure and what kind of solutions there possibly could be for research data management. And 18 months later, at the end of the project, we're still unclear about the technical infrastructure. So it was the human infrastructure elements, the training, building a bit of capacity, identifying some skill gaps that actually was quite successful within this project. But what it did mean is that we had to work very closely with our colleagues within IT services and research graduate services. My project was led by two directors. One was the director of the library, Caroline Williamson, and the other was Bill Hubbard, who was the director of the Centre for Research Communications. So it's very much a library-led initiative. However, the governance was substantial in this project. We had monthly project team meetings, and it's within that project team that the majority of the people had an IT background, not a library background. So even though we're a library-led project, our governance was very much IT, and that was, I think, was a big benefit in engaging IT staff in our work. We had to report monthly to the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research and the Director of IT, Director of Library, Director of RGS on all activities, and in particular what kind of things we were doing around the training sphere. So there was a lot of governance. But the most important thing to think about training or skilling or what skills gaps are to think of your local institutional context. Whatever's happening locally within your institution has a huge impact on the delivery of any RDM service or function. So we've got Nottingham, which has a substantial research portfolio anyway. It's multinational, different campuses, and that of course have got big implications for research data management when we're thinking of our students and academics in Malaysia and China, for example. A substantial postgraduate population, and we had a separate piece of work with our graduate school where we took the excellent research data management, which was mentioned earlier, embedded that into Moodle and made that part of continuing professional development. So if there's anybody who has any idea about reusing some of the resources out there, it's well worth it. So that covered the postgraduates. But what it did mean was that there was a lot of research activity, but very little RDM awareness, and we did do a very big institutional DAF survey of research data management of our researchers, and there was such low awareness, for example, of the expectations of the funders. So, we identified three key professional services, which I'm sure most of you have done, and that was the library, IT, and research graduate services. However, 2-3 months into post, we had some major challenges that we had to face that put our training plans and perhaps advocacy to one side for a bit. we had a chief information officer who managed a converged information services, so library and IT. He left very early on in the project, and it was shortly announced thereafter that information services, after 10-15 years, were deconverging into two separate entities. So just as we wanted IT and the library to work together, they were separating, developing different strategies, and research data management, interestingly, came up for a bit of land grab, an area that both of them thought there may be some opportunity for us here to support our researchers, so it was very political. And at the same time, the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research had only just taken up his tenure, so there was an RDM policy that was awaiting approval that had to be taken to University Management Board, but that went in limbo for about 6 months. And as most of you are aware, RDM just didn't seem to be the big priority issue. REF was the big priority issue at this time and at that point in the year. So it's all those challenges that have a huge impact on when we're trying to advocate the importance of training at a senior level, trying to get the attention of your director of the library and the director of IT to actually see training as a valuable thing to do. However, due to the makeup, I think, really of our project group being so IT biased, we had very little problem engaging senior IT people in the idea of some RDM light almost training for their staff. It was very much around awareness to build capacity and capability. It wasn't about a specific system or structure or where the researchers could deposit their data. It was about why is research data management up here on the hype cycle, and why is everybody talking about it, and why do I need to bother? But once we'd started to explore what this IT support group did, now the IT support group are actually embedded within the faculties and schools. They're for all faculties and for all subjects. The team is probably about 50 in total, and they all have team leaders. What we did find that within an internal review of information services, the director of IT support had put a paper, and it was in the intranet as they very often are. We found this paper, and it was written about a year and a half ago, and it was very much her thoughts on how she wanted IT support to engage more with their research community, not to just be the people that are there to troubleshoot IT problems, but to actually engage more, as the library did, and very successfully. So we kept that in the back of our minds, because we thought, as we went to advocate to her, she may actually understand that research data management may be an area of interest. But once we started exploring, they'd already had significant experience in this area, but they hadn't put it in a research data management framework. I will say that to you. Even though they had produced a data classification schema for the university, they didn't put that in a research data management framework, they put that in a data classification. So it's sometimes a terminology around this. There had been members of IT support who were on a working group that had produced an institution-wide research data security policy just before we got into post. And again, you would expect IT really to be involved with that. But I think one of the biggest benefits for us was that probably 70% of our project group was made up of people with an IT background. Okay, so you know, our co-directors were library staff. It was very much an IT kind of environment that we were working in. And of course, they had already been identified as a key professional service holder. Before we could go out and try and advocate that we needed to do some training with these staff, without them actually knowing what a future service would look like, that was the other difficulty here, is you're trying to train and skill people, but there's no clear idea where research data management was going to live at that point in time, and there still isn't really. So we had to do this assumption that those three were the most important professional services, and that obviously excludes the researchers themselves, who are probably the most important stakeholder when you're thinking about research data management. We also had to agree that the training would be more generic, not subject specific at this stage, that it was about raising awareness. We had to link it to the university policy, which we knew was going to be published shortly. And also, we had to engage the senior IT staff with the value of RDM training. They're very busy. Having people taking 6 hours of their time to actually do a bit of training on a service that may not even sit within your section, you've got to advocate quite clearly that you see this as an important role, and we're fortunate they did. So we had 3 2-hour workshops, face-to-face workshops. The third one was led by the DCC, so Joy and Sarah came down and did a joint workshop with RGS, Library and IT. And I led 2 2-hour workshops. Before I even thought about what was on the programme, I went to the head of IT support to get a clear brief. I was very concerned that because these were IT staff and I am a librarian, that I was going to have to go in and talk about firewalls and high-performance computing and things that were beyond me. And I wanted to make it very clear as a librarian what I was actually going in there to do training on with these IT staff, and some of them were quite senior. And it was pretty much what I'd hoped, which was, I need to make them aware. I need to make them aware what the drivers are, what some of the benefits are, bring together some of the activity that's happening at the university, make them aware that this is going to be an area of interest to them in the future. So we had to think about skills, some of the drivers, and this was the only group that I trained that wanted a specific section on open data, which is very interesting actually. I had very little interest in open data advocacy with librarians or research support staff, but certainly with the IT people it was a nice hook actually to use open data. But most importantly was data management plans. It was a mixture. Now the RDM skills matrix, I'm going to show you a screenshot in a moment, and that's probably, I was just thinking this morning of these fabulous outputs that people have got from these training projects, and our training project is just an RDM skills matrix, which we used all the time. I think Sarah and Miggy Picton from Northampton have put it in the RDM for Librarians pack, but this was the most interactive thing that we did in our sessions, and I'll show you that in a moment. But really we did a lot around research data life cycles, looked at the research data life cycles, just gave them some concept of the idea, because the majority didn't actually ever view it in that framework. We did look at some of the national drivers, and it was only within IT that there was this idea of competitiveness. What is Birmingham doing with research data management? What is Leicester doing? So that was the only group that brought that up. So it doesn't look much here, but there's a lot that actually underpins that. So what we took in the first column on the left-hand side is we broke down some research data management activities. I've actually got a document that underpins this, and there's about 80 individual activities that need to be supported with research data management, with data management planning. Happy to share that with anybody who wants that. So then we stripped all that away, and we asked them, so you've got libraries on the first column, IT and RGS. So every time we went to a group, we asked them to identify where they thought their current skill set was. It did presume that they knew what we meant about research integrity and governance, for example. I will tell you that it was the most fascinating exercise of all, because the IT people had every aspect covered. They felt they already had the skills to provide this service. Research graduate services actually covered one, which was research costing. They didn't think they had any skills at all, current skills. Whereas with the library, we were slightly more cautious, the librarians, and it was very much around what we call those traditional library roles. Research data publications, data information literacy. But that just gives an example. We spent a lot of time with this, and we used it at the beginning of sessions, and then we went back to them in workshop 2. Tom and I walked around the university with an A3 spreadsheet with this matrix on and a highlighter pen, and everybody we met, whether they were senior or not, we would put the skills matrix down and ask people to identify where they think the current skills were within their group. And we used this to support our business case. That was the other thing. So not only was it a training exercise, it was to give an idea of where the current skill sets were in the university. But to make it more real for the people that we were training is I wanted to bring in someone who actually, at every aspect, had a problem or an issue with research data management. I was very lucky. So in the sessions, for example, I invited Nancy in to say, what was your research data management issue? Did you have one? when, as a researcher. Yes, I did, she said. I couldn't even find a place to deposit my data, I didn't know where to keep my data, and as a PhD student, I'd never thought about data management planning at all. I would now. They really like this, so when you're trying to cover some of these dry topic subjects, it's really nice to actually bring a personal experience to the table. And what their journey through research data management was, it may not have actually been very positive, you know, but they need to, it actually really helps. And that quote there, that I had a couple of, because we did feedback for all the sessions, obviously I can't share that because it was to inform the business cases, but I can share some of the comments, and I had a lot. It really did reinforce the learning for them to actually have a practical example of, Nancy had shown us her data set, and it actually made it very real to them, the journey through RDM for a researcher. So with cataloguing metadata, this is a topic that we talk about this a lot. We wanted the IT people to engage with this. They'd identified themselves as being the metadata experts at the university. That really concerned us. We thought, we don't think so, we need to bring someone in. So we brought our metadata guru, who is Janet, just to explain a bit about the role of metadata in the research data management field, and to give them some kind of idea that what PIs were looking at as well, and some subject-specific schemas and vocabularies. So that was all part of making it real, instead of me just standing there talking about something like metadata, or talking about a research data management issue with data, cleaning your data set, for example, and making it suitable to publish. It was better to have the people who had actually gone through that. But I think there were benefits all around, really, and we've used this because we did have a lot of feedback. Every time we did, we went out and got feedback for every single session we did. We had collated it and gave it to the Director of IT, Director of IT Support, and Directors of Libraries. And we asked them to think about what they think the benefits were in spending those 6 hours within that 10-month period on RDM. They definitely felt it would develop an embedded RDM skills which didn't exist before this project at the university within the support community, I have to say. Apart from some seriously good expertise with AHRC bids and technical appendices, there was some superb skills there already in the support community. What they did find, some of the IT support leaders had said that they found it really useful when they were trying to engage their research community to just bring RDM into the conversation sometimes. When they're talking about data security and do you know about RDM, thought about RDM, research data management, it was a way in. It definitely improved cross-service collaboration. The fact that librarians were training IT people and IT security were asking what the training was being done on RDM from the library, it really helped cross-collaboration working, and that's crucial because it's really difficult to get people to work together, particularly when they've just been told to split apart, as was happening at Nottingham. At every session, they'd asked us for a University of Nottingham top-level RDM website that didn't sit in the library, that didn't sit in IT, but sat underneath the research, and we could use that as the evidence and advocacy to get permission to do this website, which we did, which is now publicly available. But I think probably long-term, you have to think that the IT support staff are probably some of the early adopters now at Nottingham to the whole concept of RDM, and particularly its institutional importance. So I think that's a benefit. For Admire, as I said, it's a lot, as we talked about earlier, was doing these business cases for sustainability for surface, which is just one of the most difficult thing to do. And you use everything, you're pulling in information from everywhere, because somebody will be providing the service. Your university research data management policy actually says that a service is available for the researchers to support their research data management requirements. But at the moment, you have no clear pathway who's going to provide that service. It certainly helped the advocacy with IT colleagues. Once we'd gone out and trained RDM IT support, I was then at the latter stages of the project, and unfortunately couldn't fulfil this. I was approached by people like the web team and the enterprise architecture team, and so a lot of the people in the big, more senior IT services wanted just some RDM awareness training. They were the people who are actually going to build the technical infrastructure probably, so in a way it kind of does help to have some knowledge of research data management. At the very last minute, and it really was the last minute, the head of research data security approached me and said that the Pro-Vice Chancellor wanted an RDM training plan to take to the University Management Board the very next day. So we were pulled in to deliver this paper, which was taken to University Management Board, which was approved. So I don't think they would have thought of coming to admire staff if we hadn't already engaged that community really well. But for us as a project, we always want to disseminate your outputs and to get these channels of communication going, and the IT support were perfect. I think that's why we had one of the highest response rates to our RDM survey, was because we used the IT support channels, their mailing lists, to advertise the survey, which was really useful. Some of the key takeaways for us is very much that whether decision on process owner for research data management, some people say it's library-led, research services-led, IT-led. Whoever leads it, whoever the process owner, you need to have IT involvement, not just at the corporate infrastructure level. It really helps if you have it at that kind of IT support level as well. Just as you do with faculty librarians and team leaders, there are also people in your IT services that fulfil a similar role and are also engaging with their research community. And I know each institution has a different structure, but they're really valuable and they have substantial knowledge, for example, on research data security and storage. Don't ever think, as I did, or presume or assume, that if you ask to train IT staff, it's going to be about research data security. That was one issue that they'd already got expertise in, they didn't want covering at all. They just wanted to see it in the research data life cycle and where it fitted in. It was much more these bigger, broader concepts that they were interested in. Making it real, if possible, to try and bring someone in to use as a real life example. It really does reinforce what you're trying to get across with the training. It really was very useful. But of course, the other takeaway is how sustainable is this? We did 6 hours with IT, about 8 hours with the library, about 3 hours with research graduate services. That was the support service training. But you have to think about how sustainable is this, and is it enough to upskill, reskill, retool, or whatever you're doing. So we did leave them with some key things to actually follow up, and I do hope that they do this. We heard this morning about some of the Just Managing Research Data training projects. So we've made them aware, for example, that there is a technical forum. I think it's about once a week, a dedicated hour for the technical IT support team to look at things of interest. To perhaps look at RDM Rose, for example, some of those activities. I know RDM Rose is particularly aimed at information professionals, but I think there may be some value in there at this level for IT support staff to have a look at some of the exercises there. There's this Information Security Awareness Learning Suite. I don't know if there's anybody here from Leicester today who knows about this. This is very new to us. This is something that I think UKHRs pay for. That's led by Leicester, that has quite an important RDM component. So they're exploring that. We've embedded Stephen John's support GM course in its entirety in Moodle for professional services support staff. Okay, so they have an online open educational resource there to use, but it is embedded within Moodle. And we've given them a whole lot of places to monitor the outputs from Just Managing Research Data projects. That was really important. I've done this because this is what one of the IT support team leaders sent to me after we've done some of our training, and I think it shows that it might not be called research data management, but sometimes within this community, this is what they call their IT support for research. So, you know, thinking about the concept, the call, the bid writing award, research and outputs, and nowhere in here does he mention at all the words research data management. But in a way, this is a very research data management. So I think it shows when you're dealing with a different audience, and I'm sorry about this, I don't know how things flashing across, but it is his work, so. Okay. And it is that kind of thing, I like that, IT should be an enabler. It is this kind of more soft approach, going to the research community and what they can do for them, and I think that's very important. I'd just like to thank my colleagues, Tom, and Caroline and Bill, just from the DCC, particularly Sarah and Joy, who were incredibly supportive of the work that we're doing, Nancy, who's here today, and Janet. But more importantly, my current employer, who gave me permission to Sheffield to come today to talk about a project at Nottingham. So,
thank you very much, Sean. Yes, thank you to Sheffield for allowing me to It's always a worry, isn't it, as projects end, that the expertise and the momentum is lost. So I'm very grateful for it. Thank you for that. So next, could I invite Rachel up, and Rachel will talk about, from the point of view of the roadmap project at the University of Leeds, training research officers.